Hello, everyone. My name's Hank Suttle. I'm the Sonic Shaman. I am here with two of my very good friends, Mike and Bryan, who own the Healing Brew LLC in Akron, Ohio. And today we're going to be talking all about herbs. And I think the greatest question to start with is how did you, because all of us find our passions in different ways, what called you to herbs and what really drew you to them and how you use them today?
So my biggest thing is that the way this all started was as I say, I was a knee high to a sprout. I had a very knowledgeable grandmother who decided that it was the best way to keep a rambunctious boy under wraps was take him out in the woods. We would go hunting for this plant, that plant. As we were going through this, she'd be like, "Hey, pick some jewelweed." I'm like, "Okay, that works." So we'd turn around, pick some jewelweed, and they'd be like, "Oh, hey, by the way, you're gonna need this for poison ivy, or pick this. We'll need that for something later on." And so what then started happening is I had a very strong base in herbs. I would then turn around, and as I got sick or someone else I knew got sick, I'd be like, "Hey, why don't you try this tea? Or why don't you try this instead?" And come to find out, I was actually learning quite a bit of knowledge along the way. In my mid 20s, I actually had some IBS problems where it came to a point that I was under medication. Found out that I was actually able to control it with some herbs and stuff on my own. So that led me back into the herb route, and then I've done tons of self classes, self studies, events, and everything else. Just kind of increase that knowledge base.
Yeah, and when it comes to events, I think that's how we initially met. There was a show, I think Pat Ear's show, that you had a booth at, and that was my first
Yeah.
exposure
Yep.
to you. And then I came down, and you have the most amazing little space too, where your healing brew is. Uh, anyway, if you're local guys, definitely check that out in Akron. How about you, Mike? Is that the same kind of story? And
From meeting Bryan and doing the fairs with him, learning more of the natural path of herbs versus Western medicine, learning what they can do versus everything else. Just got more and more involved in herbs, and I prefer those over some of the medicines out there now it is. So
As we're talking, Hank, I have to do my little disclosure. I'm not a doctor, nor do I play one on television. Just for anybody who's watching, and they don't hold my feet to the fire as what we're talking about. But other than that, Mike knows that expression well.
yeah, absolutely,
So
yeah, for sure.
And just a quick awareness for everybody that is watching too, that the way that I'm streaming today, if you're on my page or my YouTube channel or the Holistic Health and Healing Facebook group, we can see comments. If you're making comments anywhere else, it's not that we're ignoring you, we just don't see them in the studio. So we welcome your questions. And if you have anything that you particularly want us to talk about, please make a comment. We love to go down any rabbit hole that you like. One thing I think is really important for people to be aware of too, when I started taking aromatherapy classes, there was a big emphasis that just because it's natural doesn't always mean it's safe. And my teacher used the example, poison ivy is natural, but you wouldn't necessarily go rubbing that on your skin. So like when it comes to herbs, it really comes with a lot of people should do their due diligence, or if they're not sure, talk to someone like yourself that is very knowledgeable in the herbal realm, because there's counterindications, different things with medicines. It's real important to know what's what when it comes to herbs, especially since you're ingesting.
Oh, absolutely. And especially a lot of times I'll get people who want to have those conversations about, "Hey, I'm on this medication. What do you recommend?" And so that leads us down, as you just said, a whole bunch of bunny holes, because there's so many things, so many times that those medications are also giving you symptoms that are giving you side effects that we got to take into those considerations as we're adjusting for some of the herbs and stuff like that, which with herbs, you're almost going for those side effects. And when it comes to modern medication, we don't want those side effects. So absolutely conversations. And the other word of advice I always like to give people, especially when it talks about herbs and everything like that, is that more times than not, the holistic route, the herbal route, should be more cost effective. And if you're getting anybody out there who's telling you it's going to cost hundreds and thousands of dollars to be able to do something holistic, you're probably having the wrong person.
That's a really good point, because one of the things that I personally noticed, because I haven't been so much in the herb world, but I have been in the aromatherapy world, as the cost of um, just medicine in general and healthcare skyrocketed, and people were switching over to the high deductible accounts and everything. I noticed a lot of people were ordering oils and things because a $10 bottle of peppermint oil is a heck of a lot cheaper than a doctor's copay and different things like that. Have you noticed the same type of trend with in the herbal realm?
Absolutely. And then also too, I've noticed that there's people out there who tend to take advantage of people like that, and a $10 bottle of peppermint oil becomes $45 and $50 for that same bottle of peppermint oil, and you're getting the same benefits out of it. So yes, I understand there's some great companies out there that are higher end, but at the same time, it should not be 10 times higher than the amount you normally would pay for it.
Right.
And go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and sometimes like oils are way too potent anyway. People can start with herbs because there's a lot of plant material that go into making, like lavender, just for one example, 220 pounds of lavender to make 1 pound of oil. And so how much potency is in oil? And sometimes that might be too much, because we always say less is more when you're starting and things like that. So starting in the herbal realm before an oil realm might be something for people to consider too.
Oh, absolutely. And we have very different opinions, because right now, and this is actually what might be a good question for you, is right now there's this big push inside the essential oil community about ingesting oils. And as an herbalist, I start getting a little bit wigged out by, because if you tell somebody that you can ingest all essential oils, that then sends up red flags for me, because people start this random assortment, like, hey, this you can eat this herb, but you can't eat that herb in an essential oil. And it's like, I understand where you're coming from, but at the same time, that becomes a potency problem, because I always look like it is like a magnifying glass. You're using a magnifying glass to check out an anthill, but if you zero in on one ant, you're going to end up torching the hill.
Yeah, well, that's a really controversial point you bring up, because I've seen those companies as well. And the thing of it is if you are telling someone to ingest something that is dangerously close to prescribing, there were actually people at a show down in Florida who were putting oils in like a capsule, saying, here, take this for whatever, like giving samples out that way. And they were actually busted for prescribing without a medical license. So like it's considered aromatic medicine. Any ingestion of an oil is considered aromatic medicine. It's supposed to be prescribed or told to you to do from a doctor who's also trained in aromatherapy, which doesn't happen here. Like in Germany, my wife's cousin, he's a doctor, and he actually had an elective in his medical school program for aromatherapy. So they're trained over there. And you could get a prescription for peppermint for headaches, because it's a vascular dilator, allegedly. Since I'm not a medical doctor either, I'll give my air quotes for my disclosure.
Well,
but then if it's a supplement, what happens is the oils go through an additional process where they're heated to a certain temperature to get rid of the most volatile components. So it could be pure and then be qualified for an FDA label, but not closest to nature. And as an aromatherapist, I want it closest to nature, because a lot of those things are things that you want in the oil, and what you get with something you can ingest as a supplement versus what you would get from like an actual oil company are two totally different things, not even in the same ballpark from my point of view. But like I said, it's controversial because people have their points of view, and it's highly debated about closest to nature.
Well, it's highly debated too, is that you start talking to doctors about holistic medicine, you start talking to them about herbs. Most of the doctors don't have a strong knowledge base. Before COVID started, about once every 6 months, I would go out to Walsh Jesuit, and I would actually be talking the future of medicine. I would actually talk to them about what herbs are good for this, and kind of give them like a basic breakdown and basic knowledge. And even just because some of these herbs, you could be seeing them as, if someone's at home taking, I'm going to say skull cap, you may see that presenting as an opiate addiction or opiate, overdose. That's the word I'm looking for. As overdose. And so as a doctor, you may not be aware of what's going on. And so it's that being aware of what options are out there and allowing you to build a sister patient better. And even like valerian root is being as subtle as it is, works great to hold down your blood pressure. So someone who is in the hospital for surgery who's not taking their valerian root might see their blood pressure spike up for no other reason. They're just not taking it that morning. So
that's something I never had considered about. And for those of you joining us or are still with us, please, if you have any questions, specific questions about herbs, oils, like we can expand on oils, because I'm an aromatherapist and that's more my realm of comfort, but I'm very anxious to learn about herbs too, because there's a lot you can do with herbs that you can't do with oils, because you can actually drink the teas and things and you're not ingesting and things of that nature. But I'm curious, like with people, if they wanted to start diving into the world of herbs to really see, what nature's medicine cabinet can do, where do they even start? Maybe talk about stress, because that's a big thing right now with COVID and people being in isolation.
Stress and anxiety is a big one. That's one of the ones that I probably have the biggest conversations with, is one of the ones that people always bring up at fairs or just in general, is very much talking about the stress factors and what herbs are good for stress. Some of one of the ones that I absolutely dearly love, as we were just talking about, is valerian root. valerian root is a great one to kind of act as that starting off point when it comes to stress. And yeah, a lot of people are familiar with it as a sleep aid to help you sleep at night. But if you actually do what herbalists call microdose, what that will actually do is allow you to be relaxed, calm you down, and actually take you from here down to here without even realizing it. And also, if we have any empaths out here, like Mike, that's another good one to actually help kind of ground you out and kind of help remove those excess emotions and stuff as well.
Absolutely.
So
No, that makes me curious with the question. I'm a trained hoodoo, which is like a kind of American folk magic. And one of the things that we'll do is make mojo bags or packets and things. We'll put herbs in the bag itself, not for the purpose of ingestion, but so the person has this combination of herbs that were done in a ceremony for a particular effect. Have you used herbs in that way where you're making more like from the magical aspect of it as well?
Oh, absolutely. I'll talk about that a lot. Is a lot of times I'll give somebody a bag of rosemary under someone's pillow, especially if they're having night dreams or night terrors. What that actually does is actually helps with that, helps actually stop the dreaming process. And I can actually have kids who are in the process of having those massive night terrors to a quiet night's sleep within a short period of time, just using something with rosemary, anything under someone's pillow, or even using an essential oil as in a diffuser. A lot of that stuff will actually help that process, and that's 100% magical in sense.
I have a bag that you created a while ago, a protection bag. I have it hanging from the rear view mirror of my car.
Yep.
So
Yeah, because that opens up. I'm actually redoing my aromatherapy manual now, adding a thing on each page where I talk about oils, calling it the magic box, which is going to be all about the more metaphysical properties of them. But what I noticed is when I look at oils, and it has to be the same for herbs too. Like when you have a hormone regulating oil, for example, like jasmine, it's actually hormone regulating, but it's also known for love spells. And it's interesting to see that the actual physical and chemical attributes of the herbs and the chemicals correlate to what they said they were good for magically before they even knew what a chemical was. So I think it's a great testament of validating like the magical properties of herbs kind of going in reverse, how it's developed over time.
One of the things that I always talk about is I think magic is just what science hasn't proven yet. I really, truly do. So in a lot of ways, just now, within the last 5 or 10 years, you have the Cleveland Clinic starting to talk about Reiki, when in reality, you had all of us talking about Reiki for how many years prior to this, and now it's just taking them that long to be able to certify it and test it, to be able to start bringing it into a clinical setting. And I think that's really where science and magic kind of walks the fine line. Is I think one day it's magic, the next day it's science. It's really about learning what the difference there is.
And there's that study on sage, how they proved what the colors of sage does with the negative ions in the air, the allergens in the air, the antidepressant properties of sage. But magically, you get a cleansing out of it, right? But there's scientific proof of what it does physically to the body too,
to actually help you get a benefit out of it. Why it's beneficial to be in that smoke. Why you want to sage somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of times people don't realize. That's why a lot of times if people are having issues in the house or something like that, I'll be like, what? Definitely sage the house, but have everybody in the smoke. And it's literally just trying to get a little bit of that in everybody, just to kind of help lift that mood and lift that energy.
Yep.
And just a reminder for everybody watching, because I see you watching, I can see the viewer count. You guys are a really quiet group, though. If this is your chance, if you have any questions about oils, or mainly herbs, about herbs and how you can use them, either for magic or for physical things, this is your chance to ask your questions. And really, no topics off limits. If you guys know anything about me on my streams, I have a tendency to go off on random topics and things like that. But this is from, I call them the fake Andrew. That's an inside joke. But from the fake Andrew, where can I go locally to get a variety of food grade herbs? And that prompts another question. Is there a difference between a food grade herb and what you would find in terms of like something like at your shop? Because a food grade oil is usually like the lowest grade product in terms of oils that you would, versus what you would want to use for aromatherapy purposes. So I'm wondering if the same is true of herbs and where you would want to get food grade versus what you would want to use medicinally.
So as far as food grade and medicinal herbs go, you really want to use whatever I'm going to say. If it's food grade, it's medicinal grade, because in a lot of ways it's been, I personally, let's step this back a second. Me personally, I like to find very much oh my god, my word's not kosher as well as organic That way you have two sets of eyes in it. You normally have the governing board of your, for organic comes in and checks the property, checks the plants, make sure that's all on the up and up. And then if you look at the kosher aspect, you also have a rabbi verifying the product is the product. So that's always another set of eyes. And a lot of times with herbs, what people don't realize is when you start getting to these dried components, each dried component can look like the other one in a very, very small factor. And a lot of times it's not like looking at peppermint, which has a strong odor. Well, even if you look at peppermint and mint side by side, you'll have peppermint and mint, and you won't realize what the difference is between the two.
And the differences can be huge too. Like there's types of lavender that are not sedatives or stimulants. So you really want to make sure you're getting the right herb for what you're looking to do.
Absolutely. And so so that's why I like that second set of eyes. That way you can kind of see what's going on there. And then take it a step further is I definitely encourage the shop. If you're out there and you want to find a good supply of herbs, come down to the shop. I'll make sure you have it. Otherwise, just kind of use the same buzzwords. Make sure you're buying organic. Make sure you're buying something that is kosher. And my other thing is also it should look like the herb. Mike's been with me and he can attest to this one. I've gone in shops before and you start looking at lavender and where lavender is bright purple, you'll see it being this very muted gray. So that herb has been around for how long? So that's actually lost all those characteristics. So that's not one I would be using for tea or for ingesting. That's something more I put in a satchel or something under the pillow. So.
Right. And for people who are local, I would just put up the Facebook page for them. It's the Healing Brew. And I know I saw at Christmas, there was all kinds of things you were selling. So I'm sure you sell online. So even if you're not local, you can check out their page. And if something's calling to you, I'm drinking tea today in honor of having them on. And the teapot I made it and I got from their shop because they really do have the best stuff. So just a shout out for that. And you're also going to be locally, I think, at an event this weekend. Are you going to have everything with you? And what is that event?
Actually, this weekend we won't have. We're actually going to be in Weirton, West Virginia, this weekend. So I actually will not take herbs and everything down there. I myself and Mike will both be reading down there. And then
you'll be reading there. I'll be doing access facelifts and access body processes down there.
Double check with Carol on that. That being said, we also are coming up for Girard. We'll actually be in Girard. The Healing Brew will have all of its herbs and everything like that. That's the 27th and 28th. We'll have all the teas and everything out there as well. So if anybody has any questions, they can stop out and ask me, and I'll be happy to answer any questions they have.
Yeah, and Metroplex Expo Center on the 27th, 28th.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that, but what I'll do is I will make sure to put up that on my OneTree link. So I'll put it up here. So if you go to linktr.ee/the Sonic Shaman, that's my one link to roll them all. And I'll make sure I get the links from you afterwards and put them there for people are local and want to go out to those events, they can find it for you. But that way we don't have to worry about trying to figure out what those links are now.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, but you bring up a good question or a point. Since you're a reader as well, and you do a lot of healing work, how often do like herbs and things come up in your readings? I found that for me, like everything that I have in my awareness kind of comes through in the readings. Does that take a big role when you're working with somebody?
Absolutely. And that's a lot of times I have to be careful because I'll be giving someone a reading and then it just completely segues into this big herb talk. And Mike will be at the shop all the time, and I'll just get done with the reading, and I'm like, oh, so this is what we were talking about. Yeah. Because a lot of times I feel I can actually read with herbs. So a lot of times I can look at somebody and say, hey, you know what? This is an herb that I think would really talk to you, something that would actually help you out because of everything you got going on. It may actually help you with this way, but you also get some other benefits out of it. And I always laugh and say one of the biggest ones I use is sage. A lot of times I'll tell people, hey, try a cup of sage tea. They're like, why would I want to do that? Just to kind of help with the chakras, help clear the chakras out. It'll actually help clear the body, help cleanse the body energetically, as well as sage is phenomenal to actually help take out impurities out of the body and stuff like that. So you're getting a double whammy for that.
I never thought about drinking sage tea. I might have to try. And there's all kinds of different sage. I assume you're talking about white sage with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I think the clary sage is the only thing I've played around with that. The fake Angie's asking, do you guys do classes where I can hold fresh herbs, learn, and experience them?
Absolutely. So I do a monthly herb class. It's always the third Thursday of the month. We talk about herbs. We talk about using them medicinally, energetically, as well as spiritually. So spiritually is normally the magic talk. That's where we talk about how to use this herb, maybe in a mojo bag, using it to cleanse your house or something like that. Then we'll sit there and we'll talk a little bit about energetically. So sometimes energetic and magical kind of, I'm going to say kind of are a little wonky. St. John's wort is one that I'll use as my example here, is that with the actual elements of St. John's wort, you may not want to ingest it because of X medication you're on or this medication that you're on. But vibrationally, it's going to help bring in the divine light. It's going to bring in this higher vibration. And so sometimes that's something that on an essence level, on actual flower essence level, is something that you could use and actually help benefit you and actually help maybe ground you out or get you more in touch with the divine. But on a physical level, it's not something that would be beneficial for you. And then then we'll talk about the medicinal uses and how you can use those on a medicinal level. And maybe we'll talk about depression or using about it as a way to kind of help stabilize moods and stuff like that when we're talking about St. John's wort. So we really try to talk about that herb in its completeness and try to talk about every aspect that we can talk about.
Just an idea for you.
Like 2 or 3 a night.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I missed what you said, Mike.
Oh, he does about, usually during that class, about 2 or 3 herbs during the class to learn about. He'll pick a couple ahead of time to talk about for the night.
The last class we actually did is I actually made singing nettle dip, which is absolutely phenomenal if you've never tried it, and it actually helps with inflammation. So we actually did a cream cheese dip with the singing nettles, garlic, and lemon, and it was actually phenomenal. And it's something you normally wouldn't think about eating. And I know, Hank, you're shaking your head at me because you don't do the meat thing, but you can also sub it out with soy and soy milk, and it actually just makes the same exact dip. It's actually very good.
I wasn't looking at you for that. I actually sounded good. I'm vegan, but it's not like I'm saying don't eat the animal products or whatnot. That's everybody's choice, of course. Just an idea for you, because I'm thinking about it, and then I had a question about shelf life. One of the classes that I've taught in the past, I call it the Master Mixer, and it's like an 8-hour class that is a lab class where people get all the materials to make their own blends and everything. And I've ended up teaching it remotely, where I just send them the kit and then have the day where everybody comes on and we're just Zooming together doing the class. So I wonder if you might, it's an in-person class, but that's something you might be able to play around with, put a little herb box together, ship it off, and then have a virtual herb party.
We are actually already doing that. So everybody.
Okay, well, then you great minds think alike.
if anybody's interested in taking the class, they can take it remotely. Reach out to the Healing Brew, and I can make sure you get the herbs for the class and all the fun stuff that goes along with it. We also do some information pages and just a lot of great information, because my theory is information is power in all this. And if you don't have a lot of information, it tends when you start getting people who are doing things for real wacky reasons. So,
or worse, have misinformation.
Yes.
And speaking of classes, you actually do a tincture and salve class too every once in a while.
Yep.
And you actually, it's actually like a make and take. You actually get to make your own oil or your own salve or whatever product we're offering. You get an option of which one to make based on what herbs we have a selection of.
Yep. And so that's another class that will be coming up here in the next couple months. That may be an interesting one to do virtually, but we can definitely try doing it virtual. So
where there's a will, there's a way, right?
Absolutely.
And then my question about longevity and shelf life is like when you mentioned that lavender over time that the color kind of fades, and I know with oils too they lose potency, with the exception there's a couple that actually get stronger over time. But with herbs, like in general, how long is an herb good to use medicinally before it would be better to use in a sachet, before it would be better to just kind of move along somehow? What's kind of the time frames for that?
So I don't tend to keep around herbs that long. I normally buy what I feel that I can use in 3 months or something like that. I'm going to say once they hit about that 6 month, I'm going to say 6 months to a year mark, it's time to start moving them into a sachet or start moving them into a burning pot or something like that. Just because I like having very fresh herbs. So.
Yeah. And I'm sure, like, if you're going to a store for food grade herbs, those are definitely they're longer. So if you're looking for things for medicinal things, it might be better to go to a shop where you know that they're going through the product. Now, this question might be proprietary, I don't know, but Becca's asking, where do you source the herbs for your shop? He might be able to tell you, but then he'd have to, we have to beat you from the stream so he couldn't share.
Of herbs that I use, I have so many sources on this, it's not even funny. Sometimes I try to go directly, if I know anybody who actually has it on property, I'll try to let them supply the herb. sometimes, depending on what it is, I have harder times finding another. Wild lettuce is one that I really don't have a great supplier on right now, but a lot of people use it for pain management. So I really have to work within the connections that I have to be able to make those connections. And then also at the same time, I then will work with Frontier Co-op, work with some of the other massive providers just to get what I need on a monthly or weekly basis. And right now with COVID, it's a train wreck trying to get herbs, because if you really think about it, how many of these herbs that we use on a daily basis are actually from the United States? Where do you see your cinnamon trees? Where do you see your star anise trees? Where do you see your lavender fields? Not in the United States. A lot of that is overseas. And so you're having to really look at those options and figuring out where I can find it locally. And if I can't find it locally, who has it and who has it for the best price and the best quality? Because sometimes the price is right, but the quality isn't there.
Yeah, and definitely don't want to sacrifice quality for price on something like that, because I look at it as, if you're putting it into your body, you should be putting the top quality everything in, because that's your greatest asset in this lifetime. It's the only asset you really have. And then when you're done, you're done. Oh, there was another question I had with that too, or not a question, but a statement. Like with the oils, for example, it also depends on how the weather patterns are. I know that George is where I get my oils from, through Natural Options Aromatherapy. If the weather isn't so great and the crop turns out crappy, he might have been going with somebody for a long time, getting an oil from one specific supplier, but because of what's happening in nature, ends up going elsewhere. And it's like a constant thing where you have to be on top of it to make sure that as the world is changing, you're getting the best quality everything that you can. So
Absolutely.
great question.
And magical herbs, wherever I can find them. And I'm sure you can agree to that too. It seems like magical herbs aren't always readily available. It seems like
for magical herbs, anything you can grow yourself, it adds that much more potency, because you're training yourself for intention from the beginning, from cultivating the seeds. You suck on them a little bit because the saliva actually helps you bond with the seeds, and also helps it germinate. You plant it. You're working with that the whole time, developing a relationship with the plant. And then when you use it for whatever magical working you're doing, it has built up this momentum of intention behind it. So the more involved you can be with your herbs, the better in general when it comes to magic.
And that also, I'm going to bring up one other thing since you said that. Also, I would go where you find the vibration is the best when you're purchasing those herbs, especially if you're using them for medicinal purposes. I always tell people, go where you like the energy, go where you like the vibrations, because you're going somewhere and you like how that energy has been carried over. It also carries over in the final product. So you're also getting that vibration in what you're at that end result.
Now, if you had to pick I know this will be hard because you love all the herbs as I love all my oils, but if you had to pick like 3 herbs, that if you were to tell someone, the 3 things you should have at home for whatever might be coming up, what 3 herbs would you say would be the most beneficial for people to have on hand? I knew it would be tough.
White sage is a gimme. I always like having white sage in the house, because I think, especially if you're not able to sleep, sage your room. If you find that someone's sick, use the sage to kill bacteria in the air. So that allows you to have, it's multifunctional. And plus you can make tea out of it, and you can also do some other stuff. I guess my next one, if I had to choose 3 of my babies that I really don't like this all the time. I'm going to say, lately I would say wild lettuce, because wild lettuce actually acts as a mild painkiller. The Native Americans would actually use wild lettuce, would actually boil it down to a sap and use it for journey work. So on a microdose, it actually really helps with, as far as pain management. It's kind of like a hydrocodone, so it definitely can help with migraines, help with back pain, help with some of the other issues that you may have going on. Also, it can help relax you, help calm you down as well. So you have that's a good double player on that one. And then my third and final, I'm going to say lavender, just because lavender is kind of I know it's a cop out, but I think lavender helps vibrationally. It helps calm people down. It makes pretty good tea. You can add to your bath water. Not only that, you can actually even make a little bit of a compress with it to actually help with skin that's broken or anything like that as well. So it's really one of the multifaceted ones. And those would be my 3 to start with for anybody who's interested. Like, if you would try to slowly look at some of these herbs on a regular basis, I would start breaking them down, work with one at a time. Once you feel confident, what that herb's about, move on to your next one.
And when people do get herbs, is there a best way to store them, or like what would be to get the longest shelf life, or is that something you can freeze if you know you're not going to be using it in a quick?
If it's fresh, absolutely freeze. As far as long shelf life, I very much am a strong proponent of something that you can seal. I'm a big proponent of mason jars. Yes, I'm sure your live feed will light up on me saying about mason jars, but mason jars are airtight and they actually tend to keep them fairly fresh. They're also the benefits of them is that it also kills bacteria and it also kills anything that's in there that shouldn't be in there. But on the bad side, it also allows light in. So you have to kind of watch what you're doing with them. You wouldn't want to store them out in a window or anything like that. But if you're going to use them on a quick progression, glass, there's nothing wrong with glass at all. Otherwise, like the hermetic sealed bags and stuff like that work just the same.
Oh, is that why people have a point of view around mason jars, because of the light?
Yep.
Well, you could also have like a cabinet where you put all the jars in, and that could be dark. So, I mean, there's ways around that. Of course, my hoodoo cabinet has glass, so it wouldn't matter for me. Like, there's still light getting in there, and I just use like little, because I don't have as much volume. I just use the little spice jars that I got from like a pack of Tans before it closed up. So cool. Let's see.
So talk about point of view. There's a major point of view about the whole light and dark situation. A lot of times when people are making tinctures, they want to tell you to take this product and hide it in the back closet and never go near it, steep it for 2 weeks. And then when you're done, pull that product out and use it. When in reality, I'm a very big proponent of taking it, putting it in a clear glass jar, put it in the window, let Mother Nature do its job, let Mother Nature kill the bacteria, do everything that she can do with the light, and then go over and shake it up, work with it on a daily basis. And I find out that I have less problems. I don't see as many of the spoilages, and I don't see a lot of all the negative stuff happening to it. I've had a lot of people tell me that they've had jars explode from botulism and all this stuff. I've never had that problem, and I very much feel that it's because I do the light. I keep it in the window. I let the sunlight kind of do its thing.
Yeah, and it sounds like you've had. Sorry, go ahead, Mike.
No, he found a way to work the word botulism in, because that's my thing when he does classes. I count them times as botulism.
Now I have to remember what I was going to say. Oh no, that happens to me a lot. So, any questions coming up on your mind that what questions are you asked all the time that people might be interested about and they just don't know to ask the question? Because sometimes that's the biggest downfall with knowledge, is that you don't know what you don't know. What question do you ask? So what are the common things that you're asked for in the shop that we haven't covered already?
A lot of it's contraindications, and a lot of that has to come with conversations and stuff like that. If you're on, and I'm going to say really quick, if you're on any type of mood stabilizers, if you're on heart medication, that's definitely a conversation you need to have with somebody, because those tend to be beta blockers. Those tend to cause some of the biggest indications that could cause problems. Then I'm trying to think if there's anything else that's always a major ask. What questions do you always get asked?
I guess how much to use, what can this help with? I've got this going on. What do I need?
As far as how much to use, it's very much, I always tell people half teaspoon to a tablespoon of herb to start is a good, especially if you're going to make a cup of tea or something like that. It's a good way to start. If you're looking at a tincture, it's all based on that tincture and the severity of it, because a lot of times someone will take a tincture, they'll concentrate it. Now that's at a higher dose, and so maybe 2 or 3 drops of that tincture is enough to do the job, versus 10 to 12, which would be enough to knock down a bowl, as I like to say. So it's really about finding the basics, or finding those areas that work for you.
Now, curious, do people build up a tolerance to herbs? So, for example, I know if you're taking an aspirin for a headache or for arthritis or whatever the case is, over time you end up having to increase the dose because your body can build up a tolerance to the medication. Does the body do the same thing with herbs?
Absolutely. It does. And that's why I always tell people, when you're starting to work with herbs, you want to work with the lowest dose possible to get the best results. And if you need to, you can always increase it. You can't go back. So,
yeah. Very good. Let's see. Any questions, guys? I'm seeing. I know people are watching. It's just a relatively quiet group compared to normal. They're just mesmerized by herbs, perhaps. But this is your chance. If you're watching on a replay, you can still make a comment. And keep in mind too, if you're watching this on some of the pages, if it's not my Sonic Shaman page or the YouTube channel, not all comments roll up into the studio because we're going out to like 12 different locations, and we just don't see them all. So actually, I could check. I know we have it on your page. I could check to see if there's any questions there. That was on your page, or no, that's on the Healing Brew, right?
Yeah, and it's not going for us.
Oh, it's not going. Okay, well then it wouldn't matter. So
I'll share.
Right.
It'll get shared on
It'll get shared,
yeah, not a problem. Just want to make sure people are asking questions if they were in the comments there that we could address any of those. So let me think here. What, in terms of aromatherapy, I'm just kind of comparing like what questions I get asked and how that would correlate to herbs. Are there any combinations that particularly are counterindicated, like you don't use this herb with that herb, or that just don't play well together, I guess would be the nice way to say it?
I'm going to say my only thing I would talk about is don't use herbs that have different polarities. So you wouldn't want to, well, I would do that, but let's not go there. I do weird stuff. So every now and then I have to watch how I say stuff. So let's put it this way. You wouldn't want to put maybe ginseng in with valerian root, because the ginseng is designed to help speed up that metabolism, help drive you forward, whereas valerian root is trying to calm you down. So you're gonna end up playing. You're gonna drive your heart crazy for a little bit. Probably not the best move in my regards. That's something that I would kind of watch out doing anything that's out of polarity, and just kind of watch how you're. I would also, the follow up on this is if you're going to do anything where you're trying to do that polarity stuff or those opposite spectrums, kind of watch what you're doing and see how your body responds to it. And if you do a cup of tea with a little bit of ginseng and valerian root, it's not going to kill you by no means. But at the same time, it may not be something I look at going full circle or full time.
Actually, now the question just came to me to kind of go down this rabbit hole. When it comes to dealing with plants in general, I find that there's a consciousness behind the plant. And then in my tradition of shamanism, we have very specific ways where we start to have a dialogue and kind of enter into a communion with that. Have you noticed that as you working with herbs and things, have you been developing kind of a communication with them, or is it?
Oh, absolutely.
And so how would people, because that's like a huge thing, like somebody that's really in communion with their peppermint, for example, might be able to use a lot less and have a greater result with a headache than someone that's just looking at it as I'm having an herb. I'm having a chemical experience versus a spiritual experience. How does one start to develop that relationship with the plants?
That's a great question. And I'm sitting here trying to figure out how I initially did it as well. And you can ask Mike. I'm very much about giving herbs jobs. I am the biggest proponent of saying, hey, you know what? You now have a cup of peppermint tea. Your job is this. And it's very much that intention work. And so I think that's a lot of what you have to look at is assigning it jobs, knowing why you're taking this herb, why you're using it, and then allow the body to kind of process it and allow it to move forward in that chemical reaction. I think it's about, you're absolutely right. It's about having that communion. It's about having that discussion with that product to be able to get the best results out of it. And this is going to go down another rabbit hole because it kind of goes back to Dane, when Dane was talking about to Gary and stuff, they were talking about how he has a lot of supplements. He just keeps on his nightstand and he gets some of those same results out of it. So the question would be, I guess, is if you had a cup of peppermint tea, if you had that communion with the peppermint, would you even have to take the peppermint inside? Would you even have to ingest it?
And for those of you who aren't aware, Gary Douglas and Dr. Dane here, they're the founders of Access Consciousness, which is a modality that all the three of us practice. And we could probably do many, many streams all on Access stuff. But Dane would say he would just walk through a supplement aisle and say, whatever energies I need, whatever things that I need, body, take it. And just have the full confidence that energetically they were going to be imprinted with that. And for that matter, in Hoodoo, when you're making mojo bags, you're not ingesting it at all, and yet you still get the benefits from the herbs. So there's a huge benefit to having that communion and knowing that, hey, it's the energy. It's not just the internalization of it, but it's the energy and the relationship that you have with the plant. Mike, is there something that you do particularly to kind of develop that relationship with the plants?
For me, it's all vibrational. So it's all about feeling the vibrations of the plants and what you need, asking your body what it wants, and just feeling the energy of the plants and going with whatever you feel most drawn to and how it will benefit you in the long run. Speaking of vibrational, it's kind of like the flower essences or FES. It's all vibrational medicine or vibrational, attributes of taking a plant and using this as a, what's the word? Anyways, you get the effects of the plant without actually having to ingest the actual plant itself, and you store it in a bottle.
Right, it's the essence of it. Just kind of like you were talking about the poison ivy, how normally in a real world you wouldn't want to interact with poison ivy, but in a flower essence, poison ivy might actually help you establish healthy boundaries. You're only using a micro amount of that plant. It's in this vibrational. Sometimes the plant never even enters the water. So you're able to use that vibration of that medicine, of that plant moving forward, which allows then can help in so many different ways. FES has about 158 different essences that they have on a regular basis that helps everything with stress to emotional trauma to PTSD to sleep to pain. And it's really about using those vibrations to actually help the body and help it move forward.
Yeah, and for those of you who aren't familiar with like vibrational talk and things, there was one, I guess a researcher would be the best way to call him, Dr. Emoto, who would do these water experiments where he would freeze water in association with just different words, and the water would freeze in different patterns, and you would see things like hope would be a very beautiful pattern, and a word like hate would not be a pretty pattern at all, be very chaotic. So it's just one example that science shows us that shows how impressionable water is on vibration and the energy behind words or the energy of a plant. And even like with crystals, you can put a couple crystals in a little cup or whatnot, allow them to float on top of the water. So even toxic crystals like malachite, you can have a crystal essence of water. So herbs would work in the same way. That's a really good point. Love that.
And especially if it's one of those plants that you shouldn't be taking for one because you're on this medication, but you really want to work with St. John's wort, that's one of those times that you can use flower essence or make your own essence and be able to use the vibration of that plant to be able to kind of help you along or do the mojo back. I really think in a lot of ways the flower essences are kind of the modern day mojo back, just in a more of an approach, in more of a approachable form.
Yeah, and with the essences, you can actually ingest those too, or is that just
yes,
for?
100%.
Yeah,
it's like poison ivy, even though I wouldn't tell you to drink poison ivy oil, but guess what? Poison ivy flower essence, you can use it all. You can use it as an ingestible.
So I thought you were just using that as a joke example. You actually have poison ivy essence.
Yep.
Oh, see, look at that.
It's actually poison oak, and poison oak actually talks very much about boundaries. Talks about, if you think about it, poison ivy has a very strong sense of this boundary. If you approach poison ivy and you touch it and you're not respectful, guess what? You're going to get hit with this I'm going to say this rash that doesn't go away. But if you're respectful of it, you don't have to worry about it. And sometimes I think that correlates to people that if they put up those boundaries, they put up those shields better, and they keep those people who would be causing them harm or whatever away, it allows them to kind of keep outside of that spectrum.
But yeah, they're ingestible. You put them on. There's a little drop in a bottle. You put a couple drops under your tongue, or a couple drops in a water bottle and drink it.
Yeah, and we have one comment, but I'll share a story first. My wife and I were out in our backyard and we were taking care of weeds and everything. And I'm always like, when I have to pull weeds, where I choose to pull weeds, it's always like, well, you should have grown somewhere else. You can have a life if you grow somewhere else. And, I'm really respectful when I do it. And I was pulling this vine off a tree and my wife's like, isn't that poison ivy? I'm like, well, I don't think so. And so she's pulling it too. And I wasn't wearing gloves. I got no poison ivy at all. And she got it terribly. And so like we were both approaching the plant very differently. And I'm never going to test to see if I'm just immune, because I'm not going to go there. But that just shows you like the intention that you hold while you're working with the herbs could really have an impact on how it impacts you or whatnot. So we have the fake Andrew asking, I got some strawberry leaf I wanted to make into tea out of, but I could find almost no information on it. It didn't seem toxic, but I didn't know how long to brew it. Any thoughts on strawberry leaf tea?
I'm going to say it to you this way, any leaf teas, about 3 minutes is a good brew. To follow this up, I'm going to say most of the time, if you actually have a plant that is edible, odds is the entire plant is edible in some regards. So I wouldn't see that as being a problem. I've actually never used strawberry leaf tea, but I would assume it'd be very close to raspberry leaf and kind of offer some of the same benefits there. As far as information goes, websites are a hard one because I hate to say I'm not a huge proponent of websites. I think websites are really they're rabbit holes by themselves, because people who who put up these websites can put up a website in 2 or 3 days, and they may not have the most quality information, and it kind of gets into that misinformation factor. I really would encourage people to check out books. Books tend to be a stronger source because they have the people who have spent the time to kind of create it. Research.
Yeah, when I teach my oil class, I have some certain books that I really rely on for all my oil information, and because to your point, websites aren't reputable, and I pass out as part of my class this one news article where somebody read on some website how to get rid of glaucoma using essential oils, and they put pure essential oils in their eye and went blind. And so I use that as an example. Just because it's on the internet does not mean that it's reputable or valid, and you have to do your due diligence. And books are just way more. There's a lot more effort, I feel, that goes into those, and a lot of clinical studies too. That especially in the world of aromatherapy, they did a ton of case studies and clinical studies. I'm sure herbs are in the same ballpark where they've used them for different things too.
Well, herbs are a little bit different because they don't do as much of the clinical studies, because you have to remember, if you do a lot of studies with herbs, you now start affecting major pharmaceutical brands, and that's where they start having a little bit of problems. Flower essences, they've done some phenomenal research out there. There's a lot of great information out there. Tons of information that you can find on a flower essence between multiple sources. They do blind studies and everything like that. As far as the herbs go, that's very much more of a lines of folk medicine and talking about that stuff. And we won't go down the woes of pharmaceuticals, because I'm not against pharmaceuticals by no means, but at the same time, I think there's times that people are put on medication just because they want to put them on medication, where if they would have changed their diet, or if they would maybe try a supplement, they wouldn't have to be on. They would have to be on it.
And two things. One, for people who are on medications or you're worried about counterindications on herbs and things, the Dr. K, who I do a stream with on Fridays at 10, she is a medical doctor who is also trained in all this other holistic stuff. So if you wanted to have someone kind of look at it holistically from the medical side, and she's really good about getting people to the space where they can get off their medication safely, that would be a great resource for everyone. And one thing, I'm just bringing up the strawberry leaf again, when you are looking at strawberry leaf tea, I don't know if you actually buy that by itself, but it would be really important, I feel, for that to be organic, because that's considered one of the dirty fruits because of the way that they hold on to pesticides and things of that nature. So if you're going to be steeping a tea, especially where you're going to have it in there a long time and then drinking the water of it, it would be really important for that to be organic. So just an extra shout out for that.
Absolutely. And that's another reason why too, is like, I'm very, very big proponent of that organic word, is because you are using literally the water off the outside of the plant, and you're literally taking all the pesticides that were on the outside of this plant and putting them into a cup. So I'm very big proponent on organic, and ask Mike how many times I argue and say, this has to be organic or I don't want it.
Absolutely, yeah, for sure. Organic is the key.
Cool. And if you're just joining us, I still see people are joining in, but we just have a few people asking questions. If you have questions, if you have comments, even if it's on the replay, make them. We can always go back and we can respond to people. And what was the other thing? If you want to find out more about Bryan and Mike, their Facebook page, here we go, wanted to put that up again, is the Healing Brew, and you can connect with them on Facebook and all kinds of, if you're local, definitely go to the shop. I love the space. I got to teach a class down there, and they have a really cool classroom set up, and then a main area where you can sit and enjoy a cup of tea. Even with COVID, I think you're allowed to have so many people in now. Yeah. So it's kind of a nice little getaway from the stress of being isolated. You get a little dose of social experience with like-minded people.
Yep. Absolutely. And you were talking about, we've done a lot of talk about what I do holistically and stuff like that. But also too, I think herbs, and especially aromatherapy, works hand in hand with the energy work. I mean, it really truly does. A lot of times someone will come down for an herbal consult or something with me, and one of the first things I tell them, I'm like, hey, we can do this, but guess what? I want you to get your bars ran, because I think allowing them to have a fresh perspective on what you're doing and how you're moving forward works hand in hand, because that allows them to be responsible for their own healing and not listen to what other people are telling them.
That's huge. And for people who don't know what bars are, that is one of the many body processes in access consciousness. 32 points in the head. You put pressure or a light touch on the opposing points. It runs a bar of energy. That's where the name comes from. And that helps to dissipate all the thoughts, feelings, considerations, judgments, points of view, projections you have around whatever. So if you've had implants of people telling you that things are good or not good, it gets rid of it all. So you can be open to just your pure experience. And give one example of that. We had a a pediatrician. When we first started with our kids, we picked a pediatrician that we thought we liked, and they were having some digestion issues. And my wife, she's from Germany, and there they actually have on fennel tea. It says, it's approved by the German Medical Association that it's good for digestion. And we bring that up to the doctor. She says, well, that's just an old wives' tale. So like we have doctors telling us things like that then get in our psyche. And then what is in the back of our head when we're going to use some of these things is your experience being impacted because of an implanted point of view. So working with the energy work, like something like bars, to get that kind of stuff cleared out would be huge when you're starting to do any sort of holistic treatments and things like that.
Especially when it comes to people who have already been to a doctor, who have had massive amounts of pain, and they're trying to holistically figure out how to deal with pain so they can get off of skull cap and all this other, correction, off of opiates and all this other stuff, versus coming into a more of a holistic path using skull cap, using some of this other stuff. People really don't look at that, and they think the doctor's like, oh, well, this pain is something you have to deal with. Well, in reality, do they buy into that pain factor? And now anything I give them, they're still going to see pain. So that's why it's like, let's talk about implants for a while. Let's run this and see how we can move forward.
Yeah, and just one story around that. There was this one lady who took one of George's classes, and one of the things that we have is this arthritis blend that has anti-inflammatories, analgesics, and circulatory increasers. And she tried the roll-on, and it worked wonderfully for her. So she scheduled an appointment with her doctor, even paid her copay, goes into the doctor because she wanted to share with the doctor how wonderful this roll-on was that has, she's been plagued with arthritis all this time. And the doctor looked at her and said, well, it only worked because he believed it would work. And she, without missing a beat, for the story she told us, looked at him and says, well, I believed all those pills you prescribed me were going to work too, but they didn't do shit. So it's really a point of view. Like there's a chemical part to it. There's a physiological component to it. Belief really does influence that. But in that lady's case, she believed that, well, she said she believed that the doctor was going to work. But baby, what is your real knowing about that? Because we oftentimes glance over our real knowings about things and start to accept projections from other people, places, or things. And Jennifer is just saying, hey guys, enjoying the talk. Thank you. And she probably couldn't comment early because I know she's at work. Or did you get a snow day, Jennifer? Hopefully you did. But if not, she's being all sneaky, not typing while she's listening at work. Thank you for joining us. Any questions, guys? We're at about the 51-minute mark. We'd like to wrap underneath the hour. So this is your final chance, really. If you do have questions, comments, anything, it really is fair game. And we're going to have them back again. We have a second stream planned. I originally told you 10:30, but I forgot about Dr. K. So we will have to do 11. I'm going to be on like 3 hours straight on Friday, but we're going to do W is for Witch. That's going to be on Friday. It's going to be a little bit more of a magical conversation. So just as a little teaser for you guys watching, if you want to have a little bit more of this type of dialogue, more centered around the magical world, that's going to be coming up on Friday. While we're seeing if someone makes a comment, if you had to leave people with just one thing about herbs, like what would you really want if you have, say they're never going to see us again, what would be the main takeaway that you really would want them to walk away with so they might start to be able to use herbs in a more, actually start using them in their life?
My only thing is, if I was going to give one takeaway, my big takeaway on this would be is find quality product, find quality people to learn from, and then find quality books and stuff out there. That would be my biggest thing. Is it's about quality. Because so much, I hate to say it, and I would not be using Facebook for my information on herbs either, because I've even noticed some of these little memes that go around like, use these herbs for these reasons, and I'm going, no, don't use those herbs for this reason. So it's really about using your knowing, find out, educate yourself, educate from good people, find out what's the best course of action, what's the best way to work for you.
Right. And what about you, Mike? Anything in particular that, Jennifer says, no, she is enjoying from work again, so she's just being naughty. Thank you for joining us, Jennifer.
Like Bryan said, make sure you're educated or find good teachers or good sources to work from. But for me, it's all about the natural side of things. Whereas, Western medicine is great, and, got pills for this or whatever, yada, yada. But for me, it's about the side effects. Whereas when you work with herbs, there's less side effects or less negative side effects to work from. So for me, it's about being natural and going a natural route as far as pain, health, and whatever you do in your life.
Mike was a late convert to all this information, so I had to teach him herbs, and I'm still teaching him herbs. So.
Yeah, I'm liking the natural side of things, how it's less harsh on your body, And like one thing Brian taught me is it works the whole body, whereas versus a pill will take care of one aspect, but the herb works whole body.
It very much works the whole body, and sometimes it's more about working the body's mind, body, and spirit versus addressing it. Just looking at, hey, you have pain in your knee. Well, that pain in your knee could be caused from emotional trauma, could be caused from this. It could even be a discussion. It may even be a discussion on, hey, that's left over from an accident or left over from you playing football. Your knee actually doesn't hurt. It's more about you getting out of your own space with it.
So instead of treating the symptom, treat the body.
Yep.
Yeah. And I'm kind of along with you, quality, 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 and educate, educate, educate. For it to make it in the workbook that we use for teaching aromatherapy, we want to see it in 3 good books, like that it's referenced in case studies and clinical things. But if we find a counterindication in one place, we take that very seriously. And it's like elderberries is a great example of something that came up recently for one of my friends. They bought a whole bunch of elderberries from a farm, fresh, right? And they just started using them, and they started getting kind of sick and having headaches and things. And their husband, who is an herbalist, when he realized what she was doing, said, well, you're kind of silly. That makes cyanide. I guess there's seeds in the elderberry. If you don't boil it to a certain temperature, it creates cyanide. Who would have thought? So you don't know what you don't know. And when starting to deal in the world of herbs, it is so, so, so very important to really know what the pluses are, what the minuses are, and from a reputable source. And Mike is one of those, as is Brian. Well, more Brian, I take it, than Mike, right?
Yeah.
We got a mysterious Facebook user doing laughing, laughing, laughing. I bet you this is my person. She wants to be anonymous, so she didn't click the button to let me see your face. But you know who you are if it's you. And I know you, I put up let me put that up again. So if you want to connect with them, the Healing Brew is their page on Facebook. Their website will be back momentarily. They just had to do some, it is Mercury retrograde and weird things happen. But the Facebook page is there and available for you to connect with them. And then what was my other thing? Oh, you had a couple of events, just to mention one more time, and I'm going to note them down for myself so I can grab the links after.
In Weirton, West Virginia this weekend. We'll be down there from 11 to 5. There's a wonderful vendor mart. I know there's plenty of people who have herbs, essential oils, flower essences, as well as sage. And then you also have the reader room full of some great readers and stuff like that. For more information on that, check out the Holistic Health and Psychic Fairs event page. I'll make sure I share it. And if not, check out Carol Borowski. She's the
Angel Gift Center.
Yep, Angel Gift Center, actually. So.
Yep, and that's actually how I got introduced to Access Consciousness. And I saw her having the event, and I messaged her saying, hey, I see you have an event coming up. Do any of your vendors or readers want to do a little segment so we can talk about what they'll be doing and maybe get a little bit more word out about the psychic fair? So it's like killing a whole bunch, well, not killing, it's doing a whole bunch of things with one stone. I don't want to kill anything.
Absolutely.
Awesome. But thank you so much for coming on. This has been wonderful, and I can't wait to see what magical mischief we get into on Friday.
Absolutely.
All right, so let me take down this banner. Thank you everyone for watching the video. If you get value out of these, I invite you to help be the contagion of consciousness and share the video so we can get this information out to more people. So thank you so much, and we will catch you next time.
Thank you.